Hi, this is Kirk Nugent, and welcome to another episode of The Sound of Melanin. Today, I want to talk about or examine the idea of God. And is it possible that your God has been manipulated? Can God be manipulated? So, when you think about God, I want to go back to the indigenous people because the indigenous people had a very different idea and a different concept of who God is and what God was. So, if you take the natives that we found here in America, their idea of God, they refer to God as, first of all, they didn't call him God. And most indigenous people don't refer to God as God. They refer to God as the creator. So the natives that were here in America, they refer to God as the Great Spirit. And all they knew regarding the Great Spirit was that the Great Spirit loved all his children. And they didn't have a system of government set up. And bear in mind, the natives that were here in America, they were from sea to shining sea. They were from the west coast to the east coast, Virginia, all the way Oklahoma, in California. So they were spread across. They were a great nation. They didn't have a system of government. They did not have a system of prison system set up. They were just very simple people. They lived off the land, and they also, most indigenous people are like this. And when you go across the world, they never take from the land more than what they need. They only kill to eat. They never kill for sport. They never kill to hang a moose's head in their living room to show how brave they are. So going back to the idea of God, they knew that God loved all his children and God provided for his children. And the way their system was set up is if someone in the tribe lacked a horse, they would give him a horse. And if someone lacked blankets, another person with extra blankets would give that person blankets. So it's a system that they called one of empathy and compassion and what we would call today socialism. But in their mind, they were just looking out for their brothers. So that was the system of God. God was just very basic. There was no need to imprison anyone, no need for capital punishment. They just had a very loving, peaceful system. They were in tune with nature. Going back to the Bible said that God created man in his own image. And that's where a lot of people get tripped up on because they're thinking God created man in his own image, meaning God created man to look like him. When actually what it means, if you understand how manifestation works, is God created man in his own imagination. That's image in his imagination. And then man turned around and created God in man's own imagination. I'll break that down in a little bit. So what I mean by that is everything that's ever created was first created in the imagination. That's how you create. So everything that we as human beings or man or mankind created, we created out of our imagination. And you'll see that as our society became more quote unquote civilized and we needed more control, our God became more controlling. So our God started taking on our personality. So again, when the explorers, that's such a euphoric name for them. But when the explorers came to America and saw the natives, they decided after a while that, you know what, this land is so beautiful, we want all of it. And not only do we want all of it, they had to find a way to justify, well, how do you slaughter all these people and take away their land? How do you justify that? So they justified by saying, well, God told us to do it. It's manifest destiny. God wanted us to have this land from sea to shining sea. So all of a sudden, God started endorsing whatever wickedness was in the heart of man. And it was God's rule. God wanted it. You see the same thing going on right now in Israel and Palestine. Well, God told us this is our land. That's what the Israelis are saying, or the people in Israel. The Palestinians are on our land, and God promised that land to us. Now, let's just look at this from a logical point of view. Okay, if God promised you the land and your God is not a liar, then won't he deliver the land to you? But that's not simple enough, because if they just have to wait until God delivered the land, that will never happen because God didn't promise anybody shit. So they go and they say, well, no, God said we got to fight for the land. Now it's justification to go in there and murder people, bomb schools, bomb hospital, bomb clinics, bomb homes, because This is God. God wants us to do this. So you see how the God idea gets twisted and manipulated as the heart of man gets twisted and manipulated. So whenever something needs to be done, it's done in the name of God because it can't be justified because it's so evil. When blacks were brought to America, we didn't have this white God that was given to us. And we were given Christianity not to save our souls, because again, if you read the history books, it was believed by the slave masters and the people of that time that blacks did not have souls. That's why they could do operations on us without any anesthesia. That's why they could murder us, they could chop us up, they could burn us, because they believed we were soulless brutes. That's what they said. So there's no way you could be giving us God in order to save our soul. We didn't have a soul. So we were given God to control us, because the only thing we were taught was slaves, obey your masters. And any religion that we had or any idea that we had of God was beaten, whipped, and lynched out of us until we accept this God who told us to obey our masters. So you can see through the course of history, God has always been manipulated to carry out the evil that men do. So where do you find God? God, or this idea of a spiritual being, the idea of a creator, is not something outside of you. It is within you. And if you still your heart and you still your mind, you will hear that voice speaks to you. And it always speaks to you in a gentle, loving, compassionate way. If you're hearing something and it's not loving, it's not compassionate, it's not God. God ain't going to tell you to find a race of people and murder them. I don't care what the Bible says. So over the years, as man's heart became darker, God became darker. As man became more wicked and jealous and vindictive, God became wicked, jealous, and vindictive. That's what I mean by God created man in his own image, and then man turned around and created God in his, meaning man's, own image or imagination. So as our heart became darker, God became darker. When our heart became purer, God became purer. So God has been manipulated over the years, not as a system of spirituality or somewhere to get in a oneness with yourself, but God has been manipulated as a system of control. Whenever a government or a system wants you to do something and they can't justify it, they say, well, it's the will of God. That's what God wanted. God told us to do it. God told us to take this land. God told us to kill these people. God told us to do this. Look at all the bombing that we're involved in America, all the different nations. I think right now we're bombing 7 different nations right now. But you ask any American and they'll tell you this is a good Christian nation. Good Christian nation. And we're killing everybody that doesn't look like us. How godly is that? So again, all of these podcasts is just my idea of asking you to think about the things that you've just so easily and openly accepted. And why have you accepted these ideas, and do they really make sense to you? Do you really believe that God told the white man when he came here that he needed to kill all the Indians and occupy this land from sea to shining sea? Do you really in your mind believe that? Do you believe that God told people in Israel, you need to kill all the Palestinians because they're on your land? And the idea of being promised a land and then you got to go fight for it, let me give you an analogy for that. That's like me seeing my son and I say to my son, son, I'm going to give you $10. So I promised my son $10. And then years later or a few days later, he comes back to me and be like, Dad, what happened to that $10 that you promised me? And I said, well, son, look out the window. You see that man walking across the street? I'm pretty sure he has $10 in his pocket. Go outside and beat his ass and take that $10. And if he doesn't have $10, well, you beat the next stranger that come along. And you keep beating everybody's ass until you get $10 because, I promised it to you. So go there and fight for it. So as you can see, that doesn't make any sense. And if I said that and my son followed out those orders, he will be locked up on assault charges. And when he tells the story, I'll be locked up on some conspiracy charges. So at the same time, we accept all these wickedness that's being done on the planet and dismiss it as long as someone say, well, that was God's idea. We buy into it. Why not find the God within us and see what resonates, what's true for us and what's not true, as opposed to let someone else tell us what God is telling them to tell us? You were given common sense. That's one thing God gave you, so it wouldn't hurt to use it. I'm out. So those are my thoughts on the matter. Let me know what you're thinking. Leave your thoughts, your comments, your ideas in the comment section. And again, this is not, I'm not here to argue with anybody or to be negative or put your religion down. I'm just asking you to think for yourself. So let me know what you're thinking and we'll have a discussion. All right. Until then, we'll talk later. Take care. Bye-bye.